What else are you hearing from the palace tonight about Princess Catherine's condition, not to mention the timing of this?
The crisis began in the quietest room of all, a child's bedroom. Behind a closet door no one was supposed to question. Catherine entered expecting a normal routine, but within seconds, everything changed. What she found was not misplaced clothing or harmless palace clutter. Hidden inside the closet was a camera positioned toward the private part of Prince Louis's room. In that instant, Windsor fell into silence. Before we go deeper into what this could mean for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine had only entered Louis's room because something felt wrong. One closet door was slightly open, a tiny detail most people would have ignored. But she knew the room too well. The nursery staff kept everything perfectly organized, and any change immediately caught her attention. Royal Household Security, the system designed to protect family spaces and private rooms, existed to prevent exactly this kind of incident. Yet Catherine moved closer, her unease growing. Then she saw it. Hidden deep inside the closet sat the device that turned an ordinary morning into a palace emergency. Catherine froze before carefully wrapping it in cloth, holding it away from herself as though even touching it felt like betrayal. When William arrived, he didn't shout. He simply stared at the camera, then asked one question. Who had been in this room? A senior protection officer confirmed the camera was not registered, not approved, and not connected to any official royal security system. Catherine barely heard the explanation. Her focus remained on the closet. Louis had been placed at risk inside the very walls meant to protect him. Charles was informed within minutes. Hearing Louis's name, the king fell silent. The crisis was no longer about headlines or royal protocol. It was about a child's safety. As Catherine stood between fear and anger, one question overshadowed everything else. Who had access to Louis's room before she opened that closet? In every royal crisis, there is a public story and a private wound. This time, the wound belonged to a child. Catherine was not thinking of the future queen. William was not thinking of the heir. They were simply parents trying to understand how their son's safest place had been violated. Louis's bedroom was part of the royal household's private living area, protected by trusted staff and security. Finding the camera there made the discovery far more disturbing. It had not been hidden in a public room or hallway. It had been placed where a child slept and played. William immediately ordered every access log to be reviewed, every staff movement checked, and every entry questioned. Access logs, simply put, record who entered protected areas and when. Whoever had done this had not acted by chance. Catherine quietly asked who had last entered Louis's room before the device was discovered. No one answered quickly. The silence hurt more than any explanation could have. William's expression hardened. He was no longer acting as the future king. He was acting as a father. Charles later received a written briefing in private. He read Louis's name twice before setting the file down without a word. Camilla was informed separately and reportedly turned pale. The seriousness of the breach suggested someone knew the family's private routines unusually well. Then attention shifted to an earlier event. Every palace scandal begins with a moment that seems unimportant at the time. For Windsor, it was a small private children's charity visit that had quietly passed through a corridor near the family wing. Weeks before the discovery, a carefully managed charity preview had taken guests close to the children's private area. Catherine had questioned the route even then, asking why anyone needed to pass so close to the family rooms. An aide assured her the corridor had been fully secured, and she accepted the explanation. After the camera was found, that reassurance took on a very different meaning. William remembered Catherine's concern and regretted not insisting the route be changed. The guilt was visible on his face. The first real breakthrough came when a junior aide admitted that a service door near the family corridor had remained unlocked for several minutes during the visit. A service door used by staff should never have been left unsecured. Security specialists later explained that someone already familiar with Louis's room could have placed the camera in only a short amount of time. Catherine stopped believing this was an accident. William stopped believing it was simply a security oversight. The charity visit was no longer seen as an innocent event. It had become the moment investigators believed the breach may have begun. The quiet questions ended, security tightened, and attention turned toward finding answers. There are moments when Catherine's silence is more powerful than anger. This was one of them. She entered the private meeting without raising her voice or asking for sympathy. William stood beside her, calm but watchful, while Charles faced them carrying the weight of the crown. And then Catherine placed the hidden device on the table. Catherine let the room absorb the truth before she spoke. The meeting included only those who could no longer avoid responsibility: William, Charles, the head of household security, and the aide responsible for the charity preview route. Household security, in simple terms, is the palace team responsible for controlling access to private rooms and protecting the family's most sensitive spaces. Louis's bedroom was never meant to be part of any public route. It was a child's private space, and Catherine made that clear without raising her voice. William watched the aide carefully. Catherine asked one direct question: why was the corridor opened? The aide spoke about timing, confusion, staff pressure, and keeping the Windsor Children's Trust preview running smoothly, but every explanation sounded insignificant compared to the violation sitting on the table. The preview had been meant to show openness and kindness. Instead, it may have created the path into Louis's room. Catherine listened without reacting. Charles tried to keep the meeting calm. The king knew panic would only damage the investigation, but when Catherine spoke Louis's name, his expression changed. For a moment, he looked less like a monarch and more like a grandfather hearing that his grandson's privacy had been violated. The head of security then confirmed in an internal review that the device carried no palace registration mark, no installation record, and no authorized purpose. A registration mark is the identification code placed on approved security equipment. This device had none. It did not belong to the palace system. William's expression hardened further when the next finding was presented. The Access review revealed a missing 15-minute window during the Windsor Children's Trust preview. 15 minutes were enough for someone to slip away, use a door, and compromise the safest room in a child's world. Before anyone could end the meeting with polite conclusions, Catherine stood. She told Charles that her children's security could no longer remain under the same system. William stood beside her in silent agreement. The king understood that her demand would reshape more than one department. Behind every palace crisis is a struggle over who makes the decisions. Catherine wanted immediate action. William wanted direct authority. Charles wanted order before panic spread through the monarchy. But the palace system moved slowly, and Catherine saw that hesitation as another failure. Officials spoke about procedures, reviews, and approvals, as though a hidden camera in Louis's room were an ordinary administrative problem. A security review, meaning a formal investigation into how protection failed, normally passed through several offices before reaching the monarch. William refused to wait. He demanded emergency authority over security for the Wales children's living quarters, including who entered the area, how corridors were secured, and when technical sweeps would take place. Technical sweeps are detailed searches for hidden cameras, listening devices, and unauthorized equipment. Catherine remained silent until the room mistook that silence for acceptance. Then she quietly asked whether they would speak the same way if it were their own child. No one answered. Charles understood both palace procedure and the pain on Catherine's face. His hand tightened around his pen as William watched him struggle between tradition and responsibility. Protecting the monarchy now meant protecting the child first. Camilla's office also became uneasy as the proposed restrictions extended beyond the Wales family wing. Her aides realized tighter security would reveal who had moved through protected areas. William refused to step back. Catherine remained firm. Charles finally placed his pen on the table. The room understood before he spoke. The old system would no longer make these decisions alone. His next order would change Windsor immediately. By nightfall, Windsor no longer felt like a palace. It felt like a fortress. Doors were sealed, staff badges checked, and familiar corridors suddenly filled with tension. Catherine stayed beside Louis while William moved through the residence with quiet determination. Charles ordered an immediate lockdown of the children's wing, the private area where George, Charlotte, and Louis lived. If someone had reached Louis's room, every nearby space had to be treated as vulnerable. Every closet, vent, fixture, and service panel was inspected by an independent security team brought in to avoid internal influence. Charles knew the measures would unsettle the staff, but delaying them would only deepen Catherine's fears. Catherine stayed beside Louis, holding his hand longer than usual. She did not burden him with the full truth. She smiled whenever he looked at her, but once he looked away, the fear returned. William quietly stepped into the hallway and closed the bedroom door. Only then did his composure begin to crack. He demanded confirmation that everyone removed from duty would stay away from the children's areas until the access records were fully reviewed. Access records simply show who entered protected spaces and when. Then a technician delivered another crucial update. In a security report prepared for Charles, he explained that the camera appeared to have been placed only recently. It had not been there for months. It may have been there for only days. Catherine immediately realized what that meant. William stood completely still. Days meant someone knew the family's routine. Days meant someone had waited for the right moment. The device carried no visible branding or obvious source, but its placement revealed careful planning. Whoever installed it understood the closet, the timing, and the silence surrounding Louis's room. Catherine looked at William and saw that beneath his anger was something even heavier: guilt. He had trusted the palace system. He had trusted the security procedures. And now that guilt led Catherine and William into the quietest conversation of the entire crisis. After the shouting had ended, after the orders were signed, and after the doors had been locked, only one truth remained between them. Their child had been placed in danger inside a home built to protect him. No aid stood between them. No monarchy softened the words. In that private silence, the prince finally said what had been breaking him since the discovery. Catherine sat across from William after Louis had fallen asleep, and for the first time that day, neither of them had to perform strength for anyone else. The security sweep had moved to the outer corridor, meaning the detailed search for hidden devices and unauthorized equipment had shifted away from the children's immediate rooms. That mattered because the first shock had passed, but the fear had not. The private sitting room became the only place where they could speak without officials, advisors, or courtiers shaping every word. A courtier, in simple terms, is a trusted palace staff member who helps manage royal life and decisions. None of them were there now, only Catherine, only William, only the guilt between them. William broke first. The prince admitted he should have listened when Catherine questioned the charity preview route. He remembered her hesitation near the corridor. He remembered trusting the same system that had now failed Louis. Catherine heard the pain in his voice and understood what he had been carrying. William was not only furious at the breach, he was punishing himself for a moment he could not undo. Catherine did not let that guilt take root between them. She told him fear could not become another intruder in their home. Louis needed both of them steady. George and Charlotte needed both of them united. She reminded William that the person responsible had already stolen enough peace from their family, and she would not allow that person to steal trust between them too. Catherine's words did not erase the horror, but they changed the direction of it. The fear stopped pushing them apart. It began pushing them forward. William then revealed, through a private written request already sent to Charles, that he had asked for a permanent independent protection review for all 3 Wales children. An independent protection review means an outside security assessment, separate from the slower palace departments, designed to find weaknesses without protecting anyone's pride. Catherine understood why that mattered. The old system had moved carefully, but careful had not been enough. William had bypassed the slowest channels because a father does not wait for permission when his children are exposed. Catherine agreed to the review, but she made one thing clear. Locks, cameras, checks, and orders could protect the rooms, but they could not be allowed to turn childhood into fear. Louis still needed laughter. George still needed normal days. Charlotte still needed peace. William listened, and the future king finally looked less alone. Their unity gave the palace a new message. The Wales family would not be managed through the crisis. They would lead through it. But by morning, the private horror had become a public storm. The palace wanted control, but the country woke before the palace could breathe. By dawn, the story had broken across Britain with a force no statement could soften. This was not a debate about protocol, titles, funding, or royal image. It was about a child's bedroom. Once the public understood that, the mood outside Windsor changed from curiosity to outrage. Catherine watched the first coverage in silence. The palace statement had confirmed a serious security breach involving a private family area while withholding technical details to protect the children. A palace statement, in simple terms, is an official message released by royal offices to control what the public is told during a crisis. This one mattered because it admitted enough to alarm the nation, but not enough to satisfy it. Catherine knew why details had to be held back. Louis still deserved privacy. George and Charlotte still deserved distance from the storm. But the moment her youngest child's room became part of the public conversation, something inside her tightened. William stood beside her as the coverage spread. He understood public sympathy could protect the family, but public anger could also force the palace into decisions before the investigation was complete. Even so, William and Catherine were named as personally overseeing the new protections, making it clear they would not leave their children's safety entirely to palace tradition. Charles felt the weight from a different direction. The king was no longer being judged by speeches or ceremonies. He was being judged by one brutal question. Could the crown protect its youngest members inside its own walls? The crown, meaning the monarchy as an institution rather than just one person, suddenly looked vulnerable in a way no public scandal had managed before. Charles knew the answer could not be wrapped in dignity. It had to be proven through action. Then one image captured the national mood. A major morning front page showed Windsor's gates beneath the headline, "Who entered the child's room?" Outside Kensington Palace, a small crowd gathered with flowers and handwritten notes for Louis. They came not because of politics, but because a child had been placed at the center of a frightening breach. Catherine saw the notes later and struggled to speak. William read one message twice before folding it carefully. Charles understood the public had already reached its own emotional judgment. The crisis was no longer only about a hidden camera or a missing 15-minute window. It had become a crisis of trust. In the end, the hidden camera did not destroy the monarchy. It exposed what the monarchy could no longer ignore. Catherine's discovery became more than a scandal because it forced every old rule to give way to one simple truth. A child's safety mattered more than palace habits. Louis remained protected. William remained beside Catherine. Charles accepted that change could no longer wait. Charles approved the permanent restructuring with the weight of a man who knew the monarchy had come too close to failing its own family. Private family security, meaning the system protecting the royal family's living spaces away from public duties, would no longer be controlled only through old channels. Catherine and William were given direct authority over the protections surrounding George, Charlotte, and Louis. The children would no longer be treated as symbols inside an institution. They would be treated as children first. That was the point Catherine had fought for from the moment she opened the closet. Catherine accepted the change without celebration. Her victory was quiet because she knew what it had cost. Louis's innocence had been touched by fear. George and Charlotte had been pulled closer into a world of locked doors and constant security checks. She had forced the palace to listen, but only after her youngest child's private room had been violated. William found his peace in action. He did not need revenge. He needed certainty that his children would never again be left exposed by slow procedure or careless access. Standing beside Catherine, he looked less like an heir defending an institution and more like a father rebuilding a home. Then the final internal finding closed the circle. In a documented security conclusion prepared for Charles and reviewed by the Wales household, investigators confirmed the device had been placed during the confusion connected to the Windsor Children's Trust preview. The charity visit, meant to show warmth and openness, became the moment everyone looked back on with regret. One route had shifted, one service door had stayed unlocked. One small mistake had nearly shattered the deepest privacy inside the royal home. Charles did not bury that truth. The king allowed the staff route failure to become the official turning point because hiding it would have protected the system that failed Louis. The old access structure was replaced with stricter family wing controls, independent technical inspections, and limited movement near the children's private areas. Independent technical inspections, in simple words, are outside checks for hidden devices or security weaknesses, free from palace pride or internal pressure. That change proved Catherine had forced accountability, not simply reassurance. Catherine's final place in this crisis was clear. She had forced the institution to protect her children on her terms. William stood with her. Charles chose reform over silence. Louis remained safe, and the monarchy learned the lesson it should have known from the beginning. No crown, no rule, and no tradition is greater than the safety of a child. In the end, moments like these remind us that behind every royal title, every palace wall, and every public appearance is a family trying to protect the people they love most. Whether this story changes how you see the royal family or simply raises new questions, one thing is certain: trust is not built by tradition alone. It has to be earned every single day. What do you think about everything that happened in this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next royal story. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.